So you're thinking about selling a rental property where you expect to make a nice profit, but you know that Uncle Sam will want a big cut of it. If only there was a legal way to keep that money working for you instead of paying it in taxes. Thankfully, there is. It's called a 1031 exchange. It's one of the best kept secrets in real estate investing, but it only works if you follow the rules exactly. And I mean exactly. In this Chalkboard Real Estate investing video, I'll break down how a 1031 exchange actually works, how the money moves, what the IRS is looking for, and how you can use it to build tax-deferred wealth, even if you're selling one property and buying 2 or more new ones. I'll also show you what happens if there's a mortgage involved, what part of your sale is really taxable, and the biggest traps that get investors in trouble. Let's get right into it. A 1031 exchange, named after Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code, lets you sell one investment property and buy another without immediately paying capital gains taxes on your profit. Now, when I say like-kind exchange, you might think you can only swap a duplex for another duplex. But in reality, the IRS defines like-kind very broadly. You can sell a single-family rental and buy a 10-unit apartment building, or sell a warehouse and buy a strip mall. As long as both the old and new properties are used for business or investment purposes, you can do a 1031 exchange with them. Think of it like trading in a used car at a dealership. You're not getting cash in your pocket, you're rolling the value of your old car directly into the new one. That's what a 1031 exchange does for real estate. There are a few key players in every 1031 exchange. First, there's you, the investor, also known as the exchanger. Then there's the qualified intermediary, or QI. This is a neutral third party who handles the money. And that's important because once you sell your property, you are not allowed to touch the money, not even for a second. Let me repeat that. If the sale proceeds hit your bank account or even the escrow account of your attorney, the exchange is disqualified. Game over, you have to pay taxes. That's why the QI is critical. They hold the funds and transfer them directly into the new property for you. You'll also have a buyer of your original property and a seller of your new one. And of course, title and escrow companies and lawyers are applicable to manage the closings. Here's how it flows. Let's say you sell a 4-unit rental property for $800,000. Say you still owe $300,000 on the mortgage. At the closing, the mortgage gets paid off, and the remaining $500,000 in equity gets wired straight to the QI. It never passes through your hands. Now, you've got 45 days to identify your replacement properties, and 180 days to close. More on those deadlines in a second. But when you're ready to buy, the QI transfers the $500,000 into the closing of the new property. If you follow the rules, you defer taxes on the gain. The IRS gives you 2 strict deadlines. First, the 45-day rule. From the day you close on the sale of your old property, you have exactly 45 calendar days to identify your replacement property. And it has to be in writing, submitted to your QI. You can't change your mind after day 45. You're locked in. Then comes the 180-day rule. You have 180 days from the day you sold the first property to close on the new one. Not start the process, close. And yes, the 45 days and the 180 days run at the same time. You don't get 225 days total. Think of it like a relay race. The clock starts the moment you pass the baton, when you close the sale, and you only have a limited window to cross the finish line. So now you might be wondering, what part of the sale would actually be taxable if you decided not to do the 1031 exchange, or if you messed it up somehow? Great question. This is actually a really important point that confuses a lot of people. The taxes you're trying to defer aren't based on your equity. They're based on your capital gain, which is the difference between your adjusted basis and your sale price. Let me explain with an example. Let's go back to that $800,000 sale. If your adjusted basis, which is your sale price plus your capital improvements and minus the depreciation you have claimed over the years, is $500,000, then your capital gain is $300,000. That's the amount you'd owe taxes on, unless you do a 1031 exchange. So even though you have $500,000 in equity after the mortgage is paid off, only $300,000 of it is actually taxable. The rest is just your original investment coming back to you. An easy analogy here is to think of it like selling stock. If you bought a stock for $500 and sold it for $800, you don't pay tax on the full $800. You pay tax on the $300 gain. Real estate works in pretty much the same way. To be fair, this analogy isn't entirely analogous because of the mortgage debt and the depreciation that is in play with real estate, but close enough to help you understand the part about the tax on the gain. With that said, let's talk a little bit about how mortgages play into the 1031 exchange, because that's also important to understand. And here's where a lot of investors trip up. To fully defer your taxes, you not only have to reinvest all your equity, you also have to take on equal or greater debt. Let me explain. In our example, the old mortgage was $300,000. If you only take out a $200,000 loan on the new property, you've now reduced your debt by $100,000. And that $100,000 is considered boot, which is taxable. Now, you can avoid that tax if you make up the difference with your own cash. But if you don't replace both the equity and the debt, you're going to owe tax on the shortfall. It's like doing a trade-in on a car and downgrading to a cheaper one. You might still walk away with some cash, but that cash is taxable. So in order to make it work, in our example, where you sold a 4-unit property that had a $300,000 mortgage for $800,000 and bought a new 6-unit property for $1 million, you would need to make sure that your initial mortgage on the new property is at least $300,000 to comply with this rule. All right, so that makes sense, right? Well, what if instead of one 6-unit property for $1 million, you saw 2 awesome 4-unit buildings for $500,000 each? Are you only allowed to buy one of them through the 1031 exchange? Well, actually, no. You can buy both of them inside of the same exchange. And that is another great feature of the 1031. You don't have to buy just one property. Let's say you sell your $800,000 property and want to diversify. You can buy 2, 3, or more replacement properties as long as you follow the IRS rules. And here are the 3 identification option rules. Option 1 is a 3-property rule. You can identify up to 3 properties, no matter how expensive they are, and buy 1, 2, or all 3 of them. Option 2 is the 200% rule. You can identify more than 3 properties as long as their total value doesn't exceed 200% of what you sold. So if you sold for $800,000, your total replacement property pool can't exceed $1.6 million. Option 3 is the 95% rule. This one's actually a bit of a unicorn. You can identify any number of properties at any value, but you must actually close on at least 95% of the total value you identified. Most investors don't use this because it's too difficult to execute and frankly is just too risky. I personally did a 1031 exchange a couple of years ago where I sold one property for $375,000 and bought 2 other properties with the proceeds. One of them for $250,000 and the other for $125,000. It was nice because I was able to mix and match and I wasn't limited to having to find just one property of $375,000 or more. It worked beautifully, but only because I followed the rules to the letter. As I'm sure you've figured out by now, there are some pretty nice benefits to a 1031 exchange. The biggest is obvious. You get to defer capital gains taxes. That means you keep more money invested in working for you instead of handing it over to the IRS. Another benefit is that a 1031 exchange also lets you upgrade or diversify your portfolio. Maybe you're trading a high-maintenance property for something easier to manage, or moving from a low cash flow area to a more profitable market, or just scaling up into a bigger deal. The point is that if you're planning to continue investing in real estate rather than cashing out completely, then a 1031 exchange is a great way to defer paying a lot of money to Uncle Sam, especially if your property has appreciated over time. And here's a bonus. If you hold the new property until you die, your heirs get a step up in basis, which could eliminate the deferred tax altogether. That's one of the best estate planning moves in the real estate playbook. Now, of course, with all that said, a 1031 isn't all upside. There are real challenges. For one, the deadlines are brutal. If you can't find a replacement property within 45 days, or if your deal falls apart before the 180-day window, you're on the hook for taxes. Financing can also be a challenge. You're often trying to close quickly, line up debt, and satisfy all of these rules simultaneously. And then there's the qualified intermediary cost and risk. Some QIs charge ridiculous rates. Avoid those. It doesn't have to cost you tens of thousands of dollars to complete one exchange. There are plenty competent and reputable intermediary companies that are much more reasonably priced. Be sure to shop around and ask other real estate investors who have done 1031 exchanges, as well as your CPA and your attorney for referrals. Aside from the cost, the other risk with a crappy QI is that they'll go bankrupt or mismanage your funds. If they do, you could lose the exchange and your money. So again, make sure you vet them thoroughly. Finally, another big downside with a 1031 exchange is that you give up liquidity. You can't just pocket the equity. You have to reinvest everything to get the full tax deferral. So the bottom line is a 1031 exchange is one of the most powerful tools in real estate investors' toolkit. But like any power tool, it's easy to hurt yourself if you don't know what you're doing. If you're thinking about doing one, talk to a real estate attorney or a CPA who specializes in this area. Get a solid, qualified intermediary lined up and plan ahead, way ahead. If you like this breakdown and want more no-fluff explainer videos on real estate investing, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below if you've ever done a 1031 exchange or if you're thinking about doing one in the future. Also, if you want to learn more about some of the other ways to legally dodge capital gains taxes on real estate, check out this video I recently posted on the channel. Tap or click the screen, and I'll see you there.